Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our interview series. This is the beginning, the pilot phase, while we are interviewing leaders, specifically people-centered leaders that are doing the good work in their day-to-day and making sure that they're designing and creating and implementing systems from the beginning and at scale with their people in mind. So especially as we've moved into this remote workforce, hybrid work world, we are rethinking what our roles are as leaders. And so this is truly an opportunity for us to connect with people that are doing the work. So today I'm super excited because we have a very special guest, Drew Allison. Drew is my brother. So I hope you enjoy as we just jam out and nerd out about all things leadership. But I'm excited to be here. And Drew, we're excited to have you.
Very excited to be here. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So we're going to dive on in, but actually, I'm curious, as kind of an icebreaker, is there one value that stands out in mind as a leader that we could just riff on a little bit about what that looks like in practice?
Something I value in leadership, or something I look for in my team.
Ooh.
What's the context of the value that you're looking for?
Let's go leadership to start.
So, I think one value, especially recently, something that I've been keeping an eye out for the people that I'm leading and for my managers is nimbleness and the ability to pivot, to transition, to start and stop. And it's a broad idea that can be applied in so many different ways, but it's something that's very difficult to teach. So it's something that, when I'm thinking about leadership, I'm thinking of things that people have developed over a lifetime. And the skill of nimbleness is something that is developed long before I start working with somebody. And I find that if somebody is cognitively nimble and able to transition quickly from one topic to another, or to move from qualitative discussion to quantitative discussion, and to be able to manage the differences in both, or be able to read the room and see how their team is responding to their messaging, and be able to pivot on the spot to be more impactful, whether it's in one-to-ones, or small groups, or larger team meetings. So I'd say that's a value that I've been kind of sitting with for a little bit.
The unique one. I haven't heard that word used, but as you, I've heard it, but in the values context, it's not like the top 10 that come up. So I think however, in practice, as you're saying, it has so much depth to it and so much value that comes along with it. And we'll get in, but reading the room on a Zoom screen, as someone that has been teaching for many, many years and holding space for others, it can be a lot more challenging to get that energetic response when you are on camera versus in the room with other people, because you can't see body language as much, or just even feel them kind of disconnecting. So this is a new skill that we all kind of need to be building as well, thinking about how to build that awareness and our pacing and checking in with those around us.
Absolutely. It's interesting that you bring that up, because I regularly have conducted meetings with 60 to 100 people on a Zoom call, and even with that, you can only see so many people in your gallery view. So the room instantly feels smaller and more intimate. So the large gestures and the public speaking that we've all known from past experiences has had to change, and we've had to address people in a more intimate way, because you can't replicate the real life experience of being in a room with 100 people and having a meeting when you're on Zoom, but you can replicate some of the emotional responses that people have. and they're not going to express them in the same way, but by building a culture and a system for people to express themselves within the Zoom, I think is really vital. I had an event a couple months ago where I was conducting a panel conversation that you were actually on, and I'm sure some people here may have attended, but we had somebody moderating the chat while the panel discussion was happening. Now, if we look at the same panel discussion that would happen in person, there would only be one conversation happening, and that's the conversation that's on stage. But in the Zoom environment, we're able to facilitate multiple conversations happening simultaneously. And if we take it a step further, you can use breakout rooms or the emoji responses to even get more personalized with the team, with your staff, and get a broader range of responses than you might be able to get when you're in person. So even though we lose a bit of the pageantry and a bit of the the pomp and circumstance, I think the depth that we can connect with people is actually a lot greater than it was a couple years ago.
Yeah, yeah. And that comes to mind, just seeing how that Zoom chat was monitored in that specific panel discussion. A lot of times I can be on Zoom meetings where the chat's a distractor, but having that Zoom moderator actually was, in the larger context, it was an added role around crafting and navigating and holding space for additional communications. We're seeing that so frequently here in this new world of needing more communication and more support around that. And so she was holding space for those in the chat to communicate and interact, and was guiding it in a very productive way instead of a distracting way, even as I could even follow somewhat as a panel speaker with the chat, which was really, really useful. And I think it comes back to that pacing piece. Like, really in person, we should be pacing and checking in and allowing for flow to come in at the same time. And we, I think with Zoom, we've kind of had to slow down, or those of us that are like really studying this art of holding space in virtual settings. And I don't, like you're saying, the slowing down can lead to some of this depth, which is not a bad thing by any means.
Absolutely.
So yay for Zoom and for holding space and for nimbleness. So thank you for getting us started with that. Why don't we take a step back? Who is Drew Allison? What do you do? How did you come to your current industry? Whatever you would like to share.
Sure. So I am currently the Vice President of Personal Lines Insurance for Assured Partners of Illinois. Assured Partners is a national brokerage based out of Florida. We have 9 regions throughout the country. So AP of Illinois is the largest portion of the Great Lakes region, and I oversee all things personal lines insurance. So if you think your homeowner's insurance, your renters, your car, your motorcycle, your umbrella, all of that type of stuff is all what my team, sells and services. And I'm in charge of overseeing the service department, the sales team, and our marketing and operations teams. So it's a role that I came to after spending 3 years at Guaranteed Rate Insurance, where I was exclusively overseeing the sales team. So when we talk about nimbleness, in the past, 8 weeks since I've moved into this new role, I've had to pivot from merely interacting with sales folks to interacting with sales, service, marketers, analyzers, business analyzers, and really learn as a leader how to work with all these different personality types. So I started in insurance in sales. I was a producer for Guaranteed Rate Insurance, working with the Guaranteed Rate loan officers across the country, and that came off the back of a 10-year career in retail operations, retail management, and sales. And that was a long, wonderful career that naturally pivoted to insurance, mainly because of the transferable skills between the two. And that's a big thing that I look at, as a leader is how are things transitioning from one to another. And when I was looking to make the career move, I was really struck by insurance and Guaranteed Rate specifically, because in my roles in retail, I've always had to be able to communicate on a customer facing level, on a retail level, to sell my product and to engage with customers and to train my staff on how to do the same. And then I've always had to pivot and be able to communicate from a business to business angle. And B2B communication is completely different language, different cadence, different diction, different everything. And so my ability to pivot between those two styles kind of uniquely propositioned me to move into insurance and succeed. And so that was very much the bridge between the two. So I studied philosophy at Suffolk University in Boston as my undergrad, and I'm also in the process of currently getting an MBA in transformational leadership through the Wright Graduate University. So I'm piloting part of a new program, not piloting, but I am one of the first two new students doing this MBA program and really helping to grow and develop that program while taking on my responsibilities at work. And from a personal note, it's finals week, so we are knee deep in a bunch of wonderful papers and writing pages on pages on business development, leadership, and everything that we're talking about here. So this is perfect timing. It's a nice break.
A little distraction for you, just what you
Absolutely.
need.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's really fun to hear the career trajectories and, like you said, finding those transferable skills and just ways to evolve them and continue to tap into different sides of ourselves. And it's been lovely watching you kind of trial and error as you've gone through these different transitions, and now obviously being in this new role with the masters, you're just flying high. So it's awesome to see all the work, all the bricks that have been put down to get to this place.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's funny that you phrase it as trial and error, because when I was at Guaranteed Rate, there's a point in my career where I was facilitating about 15 interviews a week as we were building out the sales team and hiring at a tremendous rate. So talking to people about quote unquote missteps in their career, right? Like, we've all got those stints on our resume that are less than a year or less than 8-10 months. And being able to talk about those openly is really important. And so many people that I spoke to weren't able to explain the lessons that they learned about themselves in those moments. It's very easy to look at your employer and say, well, they didn't give me what I needed. This wasn't the right opportunity. And that might have been completely fair. But I think taking it a step deeper and saying, okay, what were my expectations of this role? Did I set myself up for success? Was I moving from one company to another, but not really changing cultures? So the same frustrations I had previously really just manifested themselves here. One of the things you're referencing is a short stint that I had as a regional manager for a large international company. In my heart, I knew that I was quote unquote kind of done with corporate retail, but I was distracted by the salary and the job title and the prestige of the company. And I only lasted 8 months. I couldn't. From a cultural standpoint, it was such a bad fit that I had to figure out a new move. And when I left and I had an exit interview with HR, they were asking why I was leaving, and I was totally honest. I was like, the culture of this company, while it might be great for some, doesn't align with the way I want to spend my time or the people that I want to spend it with. And sometimes, though, learning what I learned from that experience has actually directly informed my current decision and the decision I made to move into my new position with Assured Partners for a whole host of reasons. And so I think being able to talk honestly about all elements of our career path and the steps and the bricks to get from point A to infinity is really important.
I'd love to pause here for a moment because I think it aligns with kind of where I wanted to take the conversation next, of just when you started realizing people-centered practices and culture were priorities for you. Did it start at that corporate gig, or was it even earlier in your retail experience that you started picking up on, different management styles and that the culture and the people you were surrounded with had such a large influence on your day-to-day experience?
I think it started way earlier than that. And one of the one of the sales idioms that people talk about a lot is, it's the question of why people work with you. Why do people buy your product? Why do people solicit your service versus the other person that can do it 15% cheaper or 20% faster? And at the heart of every sales interaction, the only thing that matters is whether your client likes you and trusts you. That's it. Nothing else matters. If they like you and they trust you, they will want to do business with you. And that is something that was taught to me very early on. I'd say, probably in a lot of personal instances, but from a professional instance, about 16, 17 years ago, when I got into retail and was working for a small menswear store in Boston. And the way that the owner would treat his customers and treat them like family and treat them like people, and the way he treated his staff the same way, was a real blueprint for me in terms of people-oriented organizations. And that's a big, it's been a big influence for me since day one. And in retail especially, well, really in any industry, you have to be able to motivate your team. Motivation is key. And in some areas, people are motivated by money, which makes it very easy. But in many more instances, it's much more nuanced than that. And in retail, I was managing and supervising, a younger workforce, kids that were in high school or college or recently out. And their motivation, I had to tap into what their motivations were, what they were hoping to get out of the job, and be able to motivate them to work kind of on their own terms. And as I've moved through my career, that's always been my number one kind of day one objective when I move into a new role is, what are the motivations of my team? What motivates them to get out of bed, go to their home office and start working? And again, sometimes it's as simple as money. Sometimes it's as simple as the benefits of a company, health insurance, paid time off, flexibility in hours. Sometimes these things alone can motivate people to work hard. But again, in many more instances, it's far more nuanced. And so it's figuring out not only what motivates people on a larger scale, but also on a day-to-day basis. What motivates somebody at 9 a.m. is going to be totally different than what motivates them at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And all of that is, I've gotten to the point where a lot of it is kind of subconscious, and I'm constantly pivoting and changing. But I bring a lot of intentionality to it, especially around review time. And as we wrap up January and get into February and March, I'm sure a lot of us are focused on our annual reviews that HR and corporate require us to do. And for the entrepreneurs out there, probably time to do a little self-reflection and some reviews as well. And though that's a really great time to assess motivation across the team and to pivot leadership tactics for the upcoming year.
Yeah. There's a lot in there. And like you said, having that model even 16 years ago in a completely different industry at this point of prioritizing customer and employee has left you with such an imprint that and deep knowing that that's possible in business. And so when you didn't see it in other experiences, you knew that, like the questions would go off, like, I know this is possible. It's not happening here. It's still not happening here. What do I need to do to put myself in a different situation that is more aligned?
Yeah. Taking ownership of your space and the people you spend time with. And those decisions are so difficult because you have to rely on your family and support, and there's always financial implications. But it's something that I feel very strongly of, is that when it's time to make a change and it's time to leave, it's important to do it swiftly, not only for the sake of myself, but also those existing relationships, and not wanting to, burn any bridges or leave on bad terms, which If you stay somewhere long enough, you run the risk of making that happen inadvertently.
Right, right. You're drained, so you're starting to take others down with you.
Absolutely. Yep.
So, because you started 8 weeks ago in this new management position, leadership position, and you are simultaneously starting an MBA in transformational leadership, so your brain is thinking all things leadership right now. How did you get started? Like building this team, understanding their motivations. Yeah, what have you done the past 8 weeks?
So I think I was even being a little generous. I think it's been about 6 weeks.
Okay.
The first and foremost, time in between positions. I was lucky enough to have a month off between roles, but I think anything 2 weeks or between 2 to 3 to 4 weeks in between roles, especially as somebody who is closer to 40 than 30, it was a truly beautiful time to have and to be able to experience that and to have that much time. Now, if I could do it over again, I would do it not during a global pandemic and spend that time traveling, but luckily I had started the MBA program right at the beginning of those 30 days. So I was able to fill my time kind of learning to become a student again. And it put me back into a learning mindset in a way that I hadn't been in for a little bit, because my last position was just extremely fast paced. So it was very reactionary, not in a bad way, but almost like an NHL goalie, like just constantly having to be vigilant and be attentive and guarding against whatever was coming your way. And especially as a leader, that goalie really leads the line from the back. So that's that parallel kind of works in a couple different ways. But when I transitioned into this role, I had a 30-minute meeting with my new boss once a week for the 4 weeks leading up to me starting. And I think the work that we did together for her to level set with me about certain employees and what their backgrounds are and their motivations, and for me to learn about her and her management style, was all really vital in me coming in and starting quickly. I always split so leadership for me is split into 3 different key hats and key categories. So there's the management of the operations, there's the training of the skills, and there's the coaching of the people. And coaching requires trust. So you're not going to walk in and coach on day one. That's not possible. You're not going to walk in and train on day one because you don't know what needs to be trained. But you can come in and manage operations on day one. Business operations is highly transferable from company to company, industry to industry. So if you know how to read, key performance indicator reports and financial statements, you can start drawing conclusions pretty quickly. So that was step number 1, was to get some base data on what my team was doing. So that helped with the quantitative side of it. So in that first week, I really looked at what the numbers were and where I could start making the biggest amount of change with making the biggest amount of impact with the least amount of change. Because as a leader coming into an existing team, even though my position is relatively new, there's a lot of existing personalities and existing preconceptions of what the job looks like. So I had to get a good sense of what all those preconceptions were, what the motivations of my team were, and just start to get to know them as people. So after getting all my tech set up and taking a look at some numbers, I spent 2.5 days having 30-minute one-on-one conversations with every person on my team. So from a system standpoint, that's exactly where I started. I then analyzed those conversations, started to draw some conclusions, was beginning to dig deeper into the numbers. But the first thing I was looking for was allies. I was looking for people on the team that were already exhibiting a growth mindset and already showing me that they are interested in learning new skills, interested in growing, interested in developing. Those are the people that I know that I can I can put out with the rest of the team and they can back me up. It's really important to have allies. It's and sometimes those allies are obvious, like your managers or your department heads, and sometimes they're much more subtle, and you have leaders from the field that don't want to take on an official leadership role, but they enjoy, perpetuating the company line and our mission statement, as an employee with their peers. So I identified a couple of leaders and a couple of allies, and I almost instantly promoted one of them. So it was a way of showing goodwill. It was a way of showing that I'm here to bring people up, but I also needed him focusing on things that nobody was focusing on. And that goes back to the numbers and the reporting. So I needed somebody developing much deeper and richer KPIs in order for me to really do my job properly. So after I had the one-on-ones, I then did individual roundtables with each department. So I had a technology roundtable with our new business analyst, the guy that I promoted, as well as somebody who identified as a potential project manager in the future. And then I had roundtable conversations with our dedicated sales team and our dedicated service team. And through those conversations, that's an opportunity for me to sit back and really listen to what they want and what their priorities are. And that way, any initiative, any project, anything that I do to bring change to the team, and believe me, there's going to be a lot of change that comes to the team over the next year, all goes back to those roundtable conversations, and I can cite their desire for growth. And it's just my way of manifesting that growth to both satisfy my client, who for me is my staff, but also my employer, which is the company and our shareholders and everybody, above me. So after the one-on-ones and the roundtable conversations, I then conducted a 2022 vision meeting. And this was sort of the end of a 2.5-week introductory period with me and the team. It also conveniently fell right before Christmas. So I was able to have the meeting, allow people to enjoy their holidays while I planned for the upcoming quarter. And in that meeting, I summarized everything that we talked about, as a team, and also introduced myself as a leader. I think it's really important for me as a leader to show them what my priorities are and what the way in which I want the department to look. So before we even talked about anything regarding assured partners or insurance or service or sales, we talked about the importance of a growth mindset, and I used a lot of visuals in my presentation to really tell the story of what it means to have a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. I then talked about learning organizations and deliberately developmental organizations. Behavioral and developmental psychology concepts, bringing in some of that studious work that I've been doing. Obviously, translated for people that aren't into academics. You never want to alienate your team. But I was really, again, level setting the intentions before getting into the specifics. And then I did get into the specifics, and we talked about some numbers and some of the things that we're going to be focusing on. And because these meetings really are about culture, I ended the meeting on a really positive cultural note and a message that hit home exactly why it's important for all of us to be on the same page, to work together, and in response to what I heard from them, mixed with my own mission statement as a leader, I ended the meeting by presenting them with our mission statement. And the mission statement for the personal lines team of Assured Partners of Illinois is that we will grow, we will contribute, we will prosper, and we will serve. And everything that we do is to satisfy those 4 things. And if any project is presented or anything is on the table that doesn't satisfy those things, they're not a priority. But those really do encapsulate everything that we do. And so as a leader, it was important for me to put that in front of them, because then with every conversation that we've had since, I've been able to go back to the mission statement. It's all about having a couple key drum beats that you go with every single time, every single meeting. I don't know the science on it, but we all know that there's, people need to be exposed to things X amount of times before it actually settles in. And this is exactly what I'm doing as a leader. So to kind of summarize, individual meetings leading to department meetings, leading to an all team meeting, combining the qualitative with the quantitative focuses and being really transparent with my team in what my priorities are. I'll even add another step on the last day we worked before we took a break for New Year's. I sent an email to the team showing them what my 9 projects are for the first quarter of this year. Again, total transparency. So they know the 9 things that I'm focused on, which holds me accountable and also gives them a window into what I'm doing. Because I think one thing that alienates people, especially in this in this hybrid or remote work environment, if somebody doesn't know what their boss is doing every day, it can take away from the confidence of the company. And so I really like the team to know exactly what I'm working on at all times. Again, for my own accountability, but also for their own, edification of the fact that we're all in this together, and we're doing this as one cohesive unit.
That's awesome. I think it's a lot of time and setup in those first 2.5 weeks. But that proactive approach to creating those relationships, and like you said, the building the trust and understanding those motivations, and then using their language in your planning, and presenting that information, and then kind of summarizing it in that the mission statement. And I kind of hear like 4 core values within that mission statement, and to encourage that alignment is so useful. And then I just appreciate your transparency. Like you were saying, like I've got my work cut out for me, and here are my projects that I'm working on. And I think the other benefit of doing that is that your team members will have that awareness, and they'll subconsciously or consciously be thinking about how they can also support you in your work, knowing the projects you are doing, having those aha moments when they're out to dinner in 2 months. Like, it's not that we want our workers to be working off the clock or around the clock, but it provides that level of like synapse, like connection, on just a much deeper basis.
Well, it's funny that you bring that up. We're in the current climate of the culture is one where employees are asking a lot of employers, and if an employer dares to ask something of their employee, suddenly they're not aware of people's mental health or their work-life balance, and it honestly it's a little dangerous. I think in the right organization, people should be motivated to be inspired at all times. And this is something I took from school. We were talking about the difference between living your life and going to school. But if you do it right, you're living your life and going to school at the same time. And everything that you do has the opportunity to turn into a paper. Everything that I watch or read or listen to has the opportunity to turn into a lesson or something I can use in a sales meeting or in a service meeting. And it's not that we want people to have a bad work-life balance, but we want them to always be thinking critically about how they can improve what they're doing. And in a lot of ways, people are not used to being asked this. So when it's done poorly, it comes across as micromanaging or asking too much of people. And of course, we don't want to be texting our employees on the Saturday night. But if an employee texts me on a Saturday night, I'm not going to
excited to share like a quote or a show they just watched.
I'm gonna celebrate that all day. And
right.
I imagine that there will be a shift back to employers being able to encourage their employees to do this, because I think employees do their best work when they are motivated, and they're going to want to be motivated, and that requires a level of dedication that goes beyond 9 to 5. And it's possible to exercise and spend time with your family and raise your kids while still having a nugget of inspiration and leaving a voice memo on your phone and emailing it to yourself and dealing with it Monday morning. Right. Technology has made that so easy for us, across the board.
Yeah. Yeah. And as we were talking earlier, circling back, like this may have been before we actually hit record, but the amount of work that is being done now is as flipped on its head, or the type of work. So most of us are working on strategy and part of execution, and the least amount of work is the day-to-day admin, because so much more of technology can help support that. And so what you're leading from is from a strategic lens, which is where people want to be met at, and they want to be engaged, and they want they want to be challenged in that way, which helps them stay engaged and helps them see paths for growth and offering solutions and trial and error. So you very much set your team up, from what I've heard today, of just like meeting them at the strategic level and meeting them at the human level, and not just coming in and starting to delegate tasks and asking for just the task in return.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's the system and the framework that I operate in is generationally neutral. It's a big conversation in leadership right now. The fact that we have 4 generations in the workforce, right? We always have had 4 generations in the workforce. It's not like this is a new thing. People are working longer, and that's maybe impacting some of it. But it's important to have a framework that can be applied to all employees, as opposed to something that's reliant on a specific generation or a specific personality type or job model. Something that, I think one of our benefits as transformational and intentional leaders, which are just big words for saying the type of leadership that I'm doing can be successful in any industry. And if we're looking to be, nimble, poignant leaders, we should be looking to build a skill set that can work in all industries, not just the one that we're currently in.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, that is a full circle moment right there. Coming back to our nimbleness. I have 2 questions for you to lead us out for today. One, what is one thing you would, one piece of advice you'd give to former Drew as he was newer in his career?
So the piece of advice I would absolutely give myself is dream a whole hell of a lot bigger. Every ambition I had when I was in my 20s was shit, to be honest. It was too narrow, it was too small. Whatever I thought I deserved or thought that I could achieve, I've blown past in the past 5 years, 100%. And had I dreamed bigger sooner, I can only guess what I could have accomplished up until this point. But I don't look back with any sort of regret at all. But I guarantee that, especially from a responsibility standpoint and a financial standpoint, I think a lot of people are trained from a young age not to talk about money and not to discuss it, and it causes us to believe that our value and our worth is less than what it actually is. Now, I think that's changing a lot, especially with technology and engineers and development and more specialized skills. And I think it's changing for the better. But regardless of what that number is, if you're new, if in leadership, as like I was in my early 20s, late teens, I would go back and tell myself to shoot for at probably triple of what you were expecting for your life, because there's no reason it's not going to happen. And you have to account for inflation as well as you look out across the decades.
Absolutely. And how do you stay inspired as a leader? How do you continue to fill your cup up?
So constant communication with people. You're only as good as the community that you surround yourself with and the people you engage with. And so I've developed a system of maintaining consistent conversations and touch bases and meetings with people that inspire me both personally and professionally. So some of these meetings happen weekly, some happen bi-weekly, and some happen monthly. But they are on my calendar. They happen anywhere from 5:30 in the morning to 8 o'clock at night. And so that's something that I do to keep myself going, because you get to a point in leadership where it is no longer your company's job to inspire you or to hold you accountable. That comes from you, and you need to find that elsewhere. I was having a conversation with a colleague of mine a couple months ago, and she was potentially looking at a new position, and she was saying that she really wants to work for a manager that inspires her. And I told her, I was like, listen, we're beyond that. We are supposed to be those. We're being hired to be the managers to inspire others, and we need to fill our cups up outside of work. So I've redefined my capacity and what I'm willing to do in a day, and I've really expanded that to say that, if I value an individual relationship and we can only talk at 1 o'clock on a Monday, then I start work a little earlier. I stay a little bit later. I do what I need to pivot again, be nimble. But maintaining those relationships has been a big addition to my kind of self-care, mental health, I'd say, especially over the past 6 to 12 months.
Amazing. There is that scientific evidence. The 5 top people we spend the most time with, we're the most like. So
Yeah.
to have that conscious strategy and just awareness, knowing that is required for you to be showing up as your best self, is very admirable. So.
Well, and one last thing I'll add to that is also not going into those conversations just to catch up, but to really use them in terms of accountability and getting people's opinions. I often start those conversations by asking for space for myself. Be like, hey, can I talk to you about this? Can I get your opinion? Can we? And that's new for me. I never would have asserted myself, like that in the past. But I've found that in kind and in return, people want to utilize the relationship for their own growth, and it becomes much more meaningful than just talking about how we spent our weekends, or what else was going on. And so I bringing intentionality to the conversations in addition to holding structure for them has been one of the biggest impacts on my leadership.
Almost this peer coaching model for one another.
Yeah, absolutely. You would know better than me, but I think that sounds about right.
Yeah, but I also realize that I don't do that. I do that in certain conversations that were a bit more set up that way, but I know that there are more people I could tap into asking for opinions, and they would probably be inspired to do the same. So just kind of shifting that energy in certain places. Because there are times where you could talk to a good friend for an hour and you leave and you're like, I should have asked her for help around this, but I didn't,
Totally.
So.
And also, utilizing efficiencies and saying, hey, let's talk for 15 minutes, or
right.
or by keeping yourself to a tighter time frame, you force yourself to be more effective with the communication as well. So
yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you for all of these nuggets. We'll be pulling some of them out and sharing them around the internet, and this full conversation will be available as well, of course. But thank you for spending this quality time with us, and we look forward to catching up soon.
Absolutely. And if anybody out there wants to have a conversation, please don't hesitate to reach out. Would love to connect.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.